That helps me is my power consumption is nowhere near as high as a lot of these guys that are doing these videos, hooking it up to houses that are, I don't know, 150,000 square feet. I don't freaking know square feet. But anyway, 2 stories, and, their bedroom is the size of this house. And I have a nice size apartment, but, for the average person that has one of these, 20, $30,000 houses, it's not going to be very much bigger than this, or as big as this. So, with that being said, I'm running a fan, my TV, and Xbox. I'm not sure if I'm going to run Xbox or PlayStation. I usually have them hooked up one at a time, so that's how I'm going to run it today. One thing that I started to mention was the fact that I have surge protectors everywhere. These are not to protect my TVs as so much as it is a better use of conserving power. If you guys watched the movie with Jackie Chan, where they were talking about, basically having a water heater that comes on instantly, you turn it on, and then 30 minutes later take a bath or a shower. This is that. Power coming from, or that goes to a TV, can it be no more than 30 watts, 60 watts, but it's always going to it whether or not the TV's on. It's basically preparing it to more so respond to the remote coming on. But if you have it wired like I do, basically you just hit your switch whenever you want to watch TV. And I have my antenna wired in there, and luckily it has an LED that I put in that would tell me whether or not this circuit is on. So basically my antenna light turns on and lets me know that this circuit is live even if my TV is off and I don't have a picture, which tells me that I'm wasting energy. So that's something cool that I've done, and I recommend it. This fan is actually cooling this area off pretty quickly. I might end up having to turn it down or putting it on a timer. Some awards and things up there. Anyway, let me find out why I'm not on the right channel. PlayStation. And of course, I forgot to bring my controllers that I was charging at the apartment. So, PlayStation it won't be. It will be, let's go with regular TV. Just kind of see how the weather's looking today. By the way, conditions and time. Right now it's about 10 p.m. It's raining outside. It has been raining all day. Not very sunny where I was at when I was in town. So, on a regular day, this would not be a lot of power for me. But being that this battery bank has been fully charged for a while, I can show that to you, by the way. Being that the battery bank's been fully charged for a while, it didn't hurt it too much, and I only keep like 2 or 3 lights on in the house at all times. I run my freezer when I have food out here, but for this experiment, I'll be running it at all times, kind of like the LDS Prepper guy did. As you can see, my charge controller tells you that we're sleeping. We're getting about 1 volt on the line. We've had 130 amp hours come in through today. I'm at about 12.4 volts, and that's mainly because I'm running a load. Not sure if, I don't know why this thing doesn't turn the light on. But anyway, here's my little storage room. I wired my 24 volt line across here. Like I said, this is mainly an experiment to see if one person were to set this up in a day, how successful would they be at maintaining their lifestyle. And I have a 24 volt line that runs in from here to here. I have a 12 volt line that also comes in. I just haven't wired it up as if I ran out of daylight. So I'm going to work on that tomorrow. You'll get to see a little bit of that. But anyway, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 deep cycle 215 amp batteries wired up in series and parallel to produce a 12 volt battery bank that's all wired with 0 gauge wire. All of them are in parallel circuits, so that basically, the battery's power will only travel so far without having to have so much resistance in between the line. I also have a supercapacitor wired over here that basically is charged by the batteries, but through a circuit, so that it's connected directly to the inverters. The reason I have that done is so that if my freezer comes on and my compressor is running while my TV's on, it won't trip the inverter, and it won't cause me to end up being in the dark for a few minutes. I know it's a little messy. We're going to clean this up over this week. Down here I have 2 rows of 5 Marine Deep Cycle batteries that came from Autocraft. They're about $80 a piece. The batteries, the GT2 type, were about $130 a piece. But either way, they're wired up in parallel only, as they are 12-volt batteries already. We wired them all up, 10 of them in all, wired up in parallel, and they run through a circuit through this wire up to this bus bar. That's the negative. Here's the positive. They both run up and through that bus bar through a 300 amp fuse over to the this is the circuit that it follows. But anyway, basically these are through independent circuits that are controlled via here. Basically to the right, that I know it says my auxiliary. That was my secondary bank, which is now my primary, and then this one to the left, which is in the off position, is my my battery bank to the bottom, basically, that so that I can choose whether or not I need power from one or the other. The one reason that I wired them separate is because, as you know, as you drain power from one battery, they tend to try to charge each other, and they consider it a load. When you have a small capacity battery, the chemistries are a little bit different on the batteries, for one, and then also the fact that they're all trying to charge that one battery constantly. They're wasting more energy in the conversion of charging than it needs to, and it basically will cause your batteries to prematurely lose a lot more of their storage power. So, you know, I wired them up into 2 separate banks for that reason. My battery meter, all these things have been purchased over time, and even this was my first original. Actually, I'm sorry, this was my 3rd inverter that I went with. I had a 400 watt, and then I went to a 750 watt, and now I'm at a 1200 watt. And now also have an additional 6,000 watt to basically run my electrical tools without having to crank the generator up. Anyway, to keep this short, basically, I will say this. I have experimented with this one time before, where I decided to stay over a weekend and to keep from having to drive back and forth. Me and my wife were having a little issue, which I love my wife. She's great. But we had a little issue with me driving back and forth and coming home super late. So ultimately, I made the decision that it was not smart to go home one night at 1 o'clock after experimenting out here. So I called her up and told her I'd stay over. And that was a lesson that I learned was horrible, because basically I had 2 fluorescent lamps and a laptop, and I managed to kill my batteries, which was only 2 at the time. I killed those batteries within like 8 hours of sleeping. I woke up to the shrill sound of my inverter beeping and telling me, "You're retarded," and to stop using as much electricity as I was. So that was my first lesson. I also developed a chart for myself. Basically, before I had this battery meter, I had to guess where my battery was, and to do that, I basically came up with that's not necessarily scientific, but I did come up with a gauge of what to do. As you can see, basically off to the left of the 50% range, it tells me to power off my bank inverter and plug in my generator immediately. I did that quite often. Off to the right, you basically have the good range, keep it above 50%. Most of this was working for me as long as you don't have a load on your batteries. This will work because it tells you where your battery is. But for the most part, if you have a load on your battery, it doesn't matter what the size of the load is, it's going to cause these numbers to change and go back and forth. As you can see, with a small load of fan and a TV, I'm only pulling 26.6 amps. I'm not sure if you can read this, but I'm getting 12.5 volts here. Over there, on that, I'm getting 12.4 volts, which is because of the distance it's traveling to read the voltage. It's called a voltage loss, or power loss. But anyway, over here on my battery meter, I'm probably pulling somewhere around 12.6, maybe 12.7. No, 12.4. Because of the fact that, you know, basically the meter is reading so far away from the battery bank. And also because of the load, that where it's drawing from and things like that. There's a lot of numbers and analytics that you have to put into your battery bank to know whether or not you're in a safe zone or not. So currently, if I were to read it against my old meter, 12.4 puts me somewhere between 75% and 85% of my battery, which if I look at my battery meter, which is trimetric, it's got all of my readings and everything programmed into it, I'd be wrong. I'm actually at 98% of my battery because of the fact that this keeps track of all the amps going in and out of my battery bank, and it also accounts for any charging efficiency issues. It accounts for it all. So basically, this is reading at 50% of my total capacity. So for now, this basically will tell me how much power I have realistically. It's not going to go down to 50% and I know that my batteries are dead. It's going to go all the way down to 0 to tell me that I'm at 0% of my usable power to be at safely 50% of my battery bank, and that's only programmed for my top. So that's pretty neat. When I use my secondary bank, I don't use a meter on that. In fact, I just use a voltage readout here, which is not plugged in because my 9 volt's dead. But I use the voltage readout just to tell me. Change this battery. I have a battery charger for my 9 volts over there. If you failed to see me do that. But anyway, it's hooked up through these little clips. Anyway, it tells me that my small battery bank is at 12.9 volts, which is extremely accurate because I'm not draining any power from it. None whatsoever. Now, the cool thing about... I need to wire these things or put these things in a place where I wouldn't be knocking it over while recording. But anyway, the cool thing about what I have is during the power or the charging of my battery bank, basically the charge controller connects to the bus bar, which connects to both batteries. This is basically only going to allow the load or the inverter to get power. So basically both battery banks will fill up while the sun's out. Both will fill up. Only the ones that are being used will draw power from it. So, if I already have one that's completely full and the other one's not, it will, slowly charge the full one and completely charge or bulk charge the other one instead of bulk charging, which is one cool feature of an MPPT type charge controller. It's pretty neat. But anyway, as you can see, one's at 12.9, the other one's at 98% at 12.4. Pick this up, and just so you guys can see, I am off grid. I'm gonna show you an experiment. I'm gonna take and turn this power off and turn this one on. But to do that, I'm gonna turn this one on first. You're gonna see the voltage start to lose a little bit automatically, and then I'm gonna turn this one off. Basically, now I'm pulling from the smaller battery bank, and everything's still on. Next part of this experiment is now to turn off both.